た。
Now, mysteriously, with that long hair in a ponytail, he resembled
And like a slick
Florence.
burrito.
I talked to Pietro about our separation. We quarreled violently while Adele tried to protect the children and perhaps herself, shutting herself up with them in her room. At a certain point, we realized not that we were overdoing it, but that the presence of our daughters did not allow us to overdo it as we felt the need to do. So we went out, continuing to fight in the street. When Pietro walked off, I don't know where, I was furious. I didn't want to see or hear him anymore. I went home. The children were sleeping. I found Adele sitting in the kitchen reading. I said, "You see how he treats me?" And you? I? Yes, you. Do you see how you treat him? How you treated him? I turned away and shut myself in the bedroom, slamming the door. The contempt she had put into those words surprised me, wounded me. It was the first time she had turned against me so explicitly. I left the next day for France, full of guilt because of the children's crying and the books I had to study on the trip. But as I concentrated on the reading, the pages became more and more mixed up with Nino, Pietro, my daughters, the defense of Pasquale made by his sister, Antonio's words, Alfonso's mutation. I arrived in Paris after an exhausting train trip, more confused than ever. Yet, at the station, when I recognized the younger of the two women publishers on the platform, I became cheerful. I found again the pleasure of extending myself that I had had with Nino in Montpellier. This time, there were no hotels and monumental lecture halls. Everything was more modest. The two women took me around to big cities and small towns. Every day a journey, every evening a debate in a bookstore, or even in a private apartment. As for meals and sleep, there was home cooking, a cot, or occasionally a couch. I was very tired and paid less and less attention to my appearance. I lost weight. And yet my editors and the audiences I encountered night after night liked me. Moving here and there, discussing with this and that person in a language that wasn't mine, but that I rapidly learned to manage, I gradually rediscovered an aptitude that I had displayed years before with my previous book. I had a natural ability to transform small private events into public reflection. Every night I improvised successfully, starting from my own experience. I talked about the world I came from, about the poverty and squalor, male and also female rages, about Carmen and her bond with her brother, her justifications for violent actions that she would surely never commit. I talked about how, since I was a girl, I had observed in my mother and other women the most humiliating aspects of family life, of motherhood, of subjection to males. I talked about how, for love of a man, one could be driven to be guilty of every possible infamy toward other women, toward children. I talked about my difficult relationship with the feminist groups in Florence and Milan, and, as I did, an experience that I had underestimated suddenly became important. I discovered in public what I had learned by watching that painful effort of excavation. I talked about how, to assert myself, I had always sought to be male in intelligence. I started off every evening saying I felt that I had been invented by men, colonized by their imagination. And I told how I had recently seen a male childhood friend of mine make every effort possible to subvert himself, extracting from himself a female. I drew often on that half hour spent in the Solada's shop, but know why I didn't at any point allude to our friendship. Probably it seemed to me that, although she had dragged me into the swelling sea of her desires and those of our childhood friends, she didn't have the capacity to decipher what she had put before my eyes. Did she see, for example, what in a flash I had seen in Alfonso? Did she reflect on it? I ruled that out. She was mired in the lota, the filth of the neighborhood. She was satisfied with it. I, on the other hand, in those French days, felt that I was at the center of chaos and yet had tools with which to distinguish its laws. That conviction, reinforced by the small success of my book, helped me to be somewhat less anxious about the future, as if, truly, everything that I was capable of adding up with words written and spoken were destined to add up in reality as well. Look, I said to myself, the couple collapses, the family collapses, every cultural cage collapses, every possible social democratic accommodation collapses, and meanwhile, everything tries violently to assume another form that up to now would have been unthinkable. Nino and me, the sum of my children and his, the hegemony of the working class, socialism and communism, and above all, the unforeseen subject, the woman, I. Night after night, I went around recognizing myself in an idea that suggested general disintegration and, at the same time, new composition. Meanwhile, always somewhat breathlessly, I telephoned Adele and talked to the children, who answered in monosyllables or asked over and over like a refrain, "When are you coming home?" Around Christmas, I tried to take leave of my publishers, but by now they had taken my fate to heart and didn't want to let me go. They had read my first book. They wanted to republish it, and to this purpose, they dragged me to the offices of the French publishing house that had printed it years earlier, unsuccessfully. I timidly got involved in discussions and negotiations, sustained by the two women who, unlike me, were very combative and knew how to cajole and threaten. Finally, in part thanks to the mediation of the Milan publisher, they came to an agreement. My text would be reissued the following year under the imprint of my new publishers. I told Nino on the phone, and he seemed very excited. But then, sentence by sentence, his displeasure emerged. "Maybe you don't need me anymore," he said. "What are you talking about? I can't wait to hold you. You're so involved in your own affairs that there's not even a tiny spot left for me. You're wrong. It's thanks to you that I wrote this book, that I seem to have everything clear in my mind. Then let's see each other in Naples, or even in Rome, now, before Christmas." But by this point, a meeting was impossible. The editorial matters had taken up my time. I had to get back to the children. Yet I couldn't resist, and we decided to meet in Rome at least for a few hours. I traveled in a sleeping car and arrived in the capital exhausted on the morning of December 23rd. I spent pointless hours in the station. Nino wasn't there. I was worried. I was desolate. I was about to take a train for Florence when he appeared, sweating despite the cold. He had had endless difficulties and had come by car. By train, he would never have made it. We ate something quickly. We found a hotel in Via Nazionale, close to the station, and shut ourselves in the room. I wanted to go in the afternoon, but I didn't have the strength to leave him, and I delayed my departure until the next day. We woke up happy to have slept together. It was wonderful to stretch out a foot and discover, after the unconsciousness of sleep, that he was there in the bed, beside me. It was Christmas Eve, and we went out to get each other presents. My departure was postponed hour by hour, and so was his. Not until the late afternoon did I drag myself with my suitcase to his car. I couldn't leave him. Finally, he started the engine, drove off, disappeared in the traffic. Laboriously, I trudged from Piazza della Repubblica to the station, but I had delayed too long, and I missed the train by a few minutes. I was desperate. I would arrive in Florence in the middle of the night, and yet it had happened that way. I resigned myself to telephoning home. Pietro answered. Where are you? In Rome. The train is stuck here in the station, and I don't know when it's leaving. Ah, these trains. Shall I tell the girls that you won't be here for Christmas Eve
more
dinner?
funny.
Yes. I probably won't arrive in time. He burst into laughter. He hung up. I traveled in a totally empty, frigid train. Not even the conductor came by. I felt as if I had lost everything and was heading toward nothingness, prisoner of a bleakness that accentuated my guilt. I arrived in Florence in the middle of the night and couldn't find a taxi. I carried my suitcase through the cold on the deserted streets. Even the Christmas bells had long since vanished into the night. I used my keys to enter. The apartment was dark, and there was an anguished silence. I went through the rooms. No trace of the children or of Adele. Tired, terrified, but also exasperated, I looked for at least a note that would tell me where they had gone. Nothing. The house was in perfect order. 12. I had ugly thoughts. Maybe Dede or Elsa or both had got sick, and Pietro and his mother had taken them to the hospital. Or my husband had ended up in the hospital because he had done some mad thing, and Adele and the children were with him. I wandered through the house consumed by anxiety. I didn't know what to do. At some point, I thought that, whatever had happened, it was likely that my mother-in-law had told Maria Rosa, and although it was 3 in the morning, I decided to call her. My sister-in-law answered eventually. I had a hard time waking her. But finally, I found out from her that Adele had decided to take the children to Genoa. They had left 2 days earlier, to allow me and Pietro to confront our situation freely, and Dede and Elsa to enjoy Christmas vacation in peace. On the one hand, the news calmed me. On the other, it made me furious. Pietro had lied to me. When I telephoned, he already knew there would be no Christmas Eve dinner, that the children weren't expecting me, that they had left with their grandmother. And Adele, how dare she take away my daughters? I vented on the telephone while Maria Rosa listened to me in silence. I asked, am I wrong about everything? Do I deserve what is happening to me? She took a serious tone, but she was encouraging. She said that I had the right to have my life and the duty to continue to study and write. Then she offered to let me stay with her, along with the children, anytime I found myself in trouble. Her words soothed me, yet I couldn't sleep. I turned things over and over in my breast. Anguish, rage, desire for Nino, unhappiness because he would spend the holiday with his family, with Albertina, and I was reduced to a woman alone, without affection, in an empty house. At 9 in the morning, I heard the door open. It was Pietro. I confronted him immediately. I yelled at him. Why did you hand over the children to your mother without my permission? He was disheveled, unshaven. He stank of wine, but he didn't seem drunk. He let me scream without reacting. He merely repeated over and over, depressed tone. I have work to do. I can't take care of them, and you have your lover. You don't have time for them. I forced him to sit down in the kitchen. I tried to calm myself. I said, we have to come to an agreement. Explain yourself. What type of agreement? The children will live with me, and you'll see them on the weekend. On the weekend where? At my house. And where is your house? I don't know. I'll decide later. Here, in Milan, in Naples. That word was enough. Naples. As soon as he heard it, he jumped to his feet, opened his eyes wide, opened his mouth as if to bite me, raised his fist with such a ferocious expression that I was terrified. It was an endless moment. The faucet was dripping, the refrigerator humming. Someone laughed in the courtyard. Pietro was large. He had big white knuckles. He had already hit me once. I knew that he would hit me now so violently that he would kill me, and I raised my arms abruptly to protect myself. But suddenly he changed his mind, turned, and once, twice, 3 times, punched the middle closet where I kept the brooms. He would have continued if I hadn't clung to his arm, crying, "Stop it! Enough! You'll hurt yourself!" The result of that rage was that what I had feared on my return really happened. We ended up in the hospital. His arm was put in a cast, and on the way home he seemed almost cheerful. I remembered that it was Christmas, and I made something to eat. We sat down at the table, and he said, point blank, "Yesterday, I called your mother." I jumped. "How did that occur to you?" "Well, someone had to tell her. I told her what you did to me." "It was my job to talk to her." "Why? To lie to her the way you lied to me?" I became agitated again, but I tried to contain myself. I was afraid that he would start breaking his bones again to avoid breaking mine. Instead, I saw that he smiled calmly, looking at his arm in the cast. "So I can't drive," he muttered. "Where do you have to go?" "To the station." I discovered that my mother had set out by train on Christmas Day, the day she normally assumed domestic centrality, the highest of her responsibilities, and was about to arrive. 13. I was tempted to flee. I thought of going to Naples, escaping to my mother's city just as she was arriving in mine, and seeking some tranquility with Nino. But I didn't move. Although I felt that I was changed, I had remained the disciplined person who had never avoided anything. And besides, I said to myself, what can she do to me? I'm a woman, not a child. At most, she'll bring something good to eat, like that Christmas 10 years ago, when I was sick and she came to see me in the dormitory at the Normale. I went with Pietro to get my mother at the station. I drove. She got off the train proudly. She had new clothes, a new purse, new shoes, even a little powder on her cheeks. "You look well," I said. "You're very stylish." She hissed, "No thanks to you," and didn't say another word to me. To make up for it, she was very affectionate toward Pietro. She asked about his cast, and since he was vague, he said he had bumped into a door. She began to mumble in hesitant Italian. "Bumped. I know who made you bump it. I imagine. Bumped." Once we got home, she ended her feigned composure. She made me a long speech, limping back and forth in the living room. She praised my husband in an exaggerated fashion. She ordered me to ask his forgiveness immediately. When I didn't, she began to beg him herself to forgive me, and swore on Pepe, Gianni, and Elisa that she would not go home if the two of us did not make peace. At first, with all her hyperbole, she seemed to be making fun of both me and my husband. The list she made of Pietro's virtues appeared infinite, and, I have to admit, she didn't stint on mine either. She emphasized endlessly that, when it came to intelligence and scholarship, we were made for each other. She urged us to think of Dede's good. Dede was her favorite granddaughter. She forgot to mention Elsa. The child understood everything, and it wasn't right to make her suffer. My husband, while she spoke, appeared to agree, even though he wore the incredulous expression he assumed in the face of any spectacle of excess. She hugged him, kissed him, thanked him for his generosity, before which she shouted at me I should go down on my knees. She kept pushing us with rude claps toward each other so that we would hug and kiss each other. I drew back. I was aloof. The whole time I thought, I can't bear that at a moment like this, in front of Pietro, I also have to account for the fact that I am the daughter of this woman. And meanwhile, I tried to calm myself by saying, it's her usual scene. Soon she'll get tired and go to bed. But when she grabbed me for the 100th time, insisting I admit that I had made a serious mistake, I couldn't take it anymore. Her hands offended me, and I pulled away. I said something like, enough, Mom. It's pointless. I can't stay with Pietro anymore. I love someone else. It was a mistake. I knew her. She was just waiting for a small provocation. Her litany broke off. Things changed in a flash. She slapped me violently, shouting nonstop, "Shut up, you whore! Shut up! Shut up!" And she tried to grab me by the hair. She cried that she couldn't stand it any longer, that it wasn't possible that I should want to ruin my life, running after Saratore's son, who was worse, much worse, than that man of shit who was his father. Once, she cried, I thought it was your friend Lena leading you on this evil course, but I was wrong. You are the shameless one. Without you, she's become a fine person. Damn me that I didn't break your legs when you were a child. You have a husband of gold who makes you a lady in this beautiful city, who loves you, who has given you 2 daughters, and you repay him like this, bitch? Come here. I gave birth to you, and I'll kill you.
I'll kill you.
She was on me. I felt as if she really wanted to kill me. In those moments, I felt all the truth of the disappointment that I was causing her, all the truth of the maternal love that despaired of subjecting me to what she considered my good. That is, what she had never had, and what I instead had, and what, until the day before, had made her the most fortunate mother in the neighborhood, and was ready to turn into hatred and destroy me, to punish me for my waste of God's gifts. So I pushed her away. I pushed her, shouting louder than she was. I pushed her involuntarily, instinctively, with such force that I made her lose her balance, and she fell to the floor. Pietro was frightened. I saw it in his face, in his eyes, my world colliding with his. Certainly, in all his life, he had never witnessed a scene like that. Words so aggressive, reactions so frenzied. My mother had overturned a chair. She had fallen heavily. Now she had trouble getting up because of her bad leg. She was waving one arm in an effort to grab the edge of the table and pull herself up. But she didn't stop. She went on screaming threats and insults at me. She didn't stop even when Pietro, shocked, helped her up with his good arm. Her voice choked, angry, and at the same time truly grieved. Eyes staring, she gasped, "You're not my child. He's my child. Him. Not even your father wants you anymore. Not even your siblings. Saratore's son is bound to stick you with the clap and syphilis. What did I do wrong to come to a day like this? Oh God. Oh God. God. I want to die this minute. I want to die now. She was so overwhelmed by her suffering that, incredibly, she burst into tears. I ran away and locked myself in the bedroom. I didn't know what to do. Never would I have expected that a separation would involve such torture. I was frightened. It was devastating. From what obscure depth, what presumption had come the determination to push back my mother with her own physical violence? I became calmer only when, after a while, Pietro knocked and said softly, with an unexpected gentleness, "Don't open the door. I'm not asking you to let me in. I just want to say
God,
that I didn't want this. It's too much. Not even you deserve it." 14. I hoped that my mother would soften, that in the morning, with one of her abrupt swerves, she would find a way of affirming that she loved me, and in spite of everything, was proud.
Hello, who's calling?
But she didn't. I heard her talking to Pietro
Who's
all night.
calling?
She flattered him. She repeated bitterly that I had always been her cross. She said, sighing, that one had to have patience with me. The next day, to avoid quarreling again, I wandered through the house or tried to read, without
Yeah.
ever joining their councils. I was very unhappy. I was ashamed of the shove I had given her. I was ashamed of her and of myself. I wanted to apologize, embrace her, but I was afraid that she would misunderstand and be convinced that I had given in. If she had gone so far as to assert that I was the black soul of Leela and not Leela mine, I must have been a truly
Take it off, is it?
intolerable disappointment to
You
her.
feel hot?
I said to myself,
No, I
"Don't
don't.
excuse her.
To here.
No, it's
Her unit of measure
uncomfortable.
is the
Uncomfortable. Like a princess.
is arranged
This is
for beds.
uncomfortable.
She feels related to the Solanas
Yes.
thanks to Elisa. Her sons
Stupid.
finally work for Marcella,
First,
whom she proudly calls her son-in-law. In
Why
those
I
new clothes, she
want
wears the sign
take
of
off this?
prosperity
Where?
rained down on her. It's natural, therefore, that Leela, working for Michele Solana, in a stable home with
Okay.
Enzo, so proudly calls her neighbor, who was the black and of myself. I wanted to apologize, embrace her, but I was afraid that she would misunderstand and be convinced that I had given in. If she had gone so far as to assert that I was the black soul of Leela and not Leela mine, I must have been a truly intolerable disappointment to her. I said to myself, to excuse her, her unit of measure is the neighborhood. There, everything, in her eyes, is arranged for the best. She feels related to the Solanas thanks to Elisa. Her sons finally work for Marcella, whom she proudly calls her son-in-law. In those new clothes, she wears the sign of the prosperity that has rained down on her. It's natural, therefore, that Leela, working for Michele Solana, in a stable home with Enzo, so rich she wants to bequeath her parents the small apartment they live in, appears to her much more successful than me. But arguments like that served only to further mark the distance between her and me. We no longer had any point of contact. She departed without our having spoken a word to each other. Pietro and I took her to the station in the car, but she acted as if I were not driving. She confined herself to wishing Pietro all the best, and urging him, until a moment before the train left, to keep her informed about his broken arm and about the children. As soon as she left, I realized with some surprise that her eruption had had an unhoped-for effect. My husband, as we were returning home, went beyond the few phrases of solidarity whispered outside my door the night before. That intemperate encounter with my mother must have revealed to him about me, about how I had grown up, more than what I had told him and he had imagined. He felt sorry for me, I think. He returned abruptly to himself. Our relations became polite. A few days later, we went to a lawyer who talked for a moment about this and that, then asked, "You're sure you don't want to live together anymore?" "How can one live with a person who no longer loves you?" Pietro answered. "You, Signora, you no longer want your husband?" "It's my business," I said. "All you have to do is settle the practical details of the separation." When we were back on the street, Pietro laughed. "You're just like your mother." "It's not true." "You're right. It's not true. You're like your mother if she had had an education and had started writing novels." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're worse." I was angry, but not very. I was glad that within the limits of the possible, he had come to his senses. I drew a sigh of relief and began to focus on what to do. In the course of long phone calls to Nino, I told him everything that had happened since the moment we parted, and we discussed my moving to Naples. Out of prudence, I didn't tell him that Pietro and I had begun to sleep under the same roof, even if in separate rooms, naturally. Most important, I talked to my daughters often, and I told Adele, with explicit hostility, that I would come to get them. "Don't worry," my mother-in-law tried to reassure me. "You can leave them as long as you need to. Dede has school. We can send her here, nearby. I would take care of everything. No, I need them with me. Think about it. A woman separated, with 2 children and your ambitions, has to take account of reality and decide what she can give up and what she can't." Everything in that last sentence bothered me. 15. I wanted to leave immediately for Genoa, but I got a phone call from France. The older of my 2 publishers asked me to put into writing, for an important journal, the arguments she had heard me make in public. So right away I found myself in a situation in which I had to choose between going to get my daughters and starting work. I put off my departure. I worked day and night with the anxiety of doing well. I was still trying to give my text an acceptable form when Nino announced to me that, before returning to the university, he had some free days and was eager to see me. I couldn't resist. We drove to Argentario. I was dazed by love. We spent marvelous days devoted to the winter sea, and, as had never happened with either Franco or even less Pietro, to the pleasure of eating and drinking, conversation, sex. Every morning at dawn, I dragged myself out of bed and began writing. One evening, in bed, Nino gave me some pages he had written, saying that he would value my opinion. It was a complicated essay on Italcidere in Bagnoli. I read it lying close beside him, while now and then he murmured, self-critical, "I write badly. Correct it if you want. You're better. You were better in high school." I praised his work highly and suggested some corrections, but he wasn't satisfied. He urged me to intervene further. Then, finally, as if to convince me of the need for my corrections, he said that he had a terrible thing to reveal to me. Half embarrassed, half ironic, he described this secret. "The most shameful thing I've done in my life." And he said that it had to do with the article I had written in high school about my fight with the religion teacher, the one that he had commissioned for a student magazine. "What did you do?" I asked, laughing. "I'll tell you. But remember, I was just was slightly worried. He said that when he read my article, he couldn't believe that someone could write in such a pleasing and intelligent way. I was content with that compliment. I kissed him. I remembered how I had labored over those pages with Leela, and meanwhile I described to him in a self-ironic way the disappointment, the pain I had felt when the magazine hadn't had space to publish it. I told you that? Nino asked me uneasily. Maybe. I don't remember now. He had an expression of dismay. The truth is that there was plenty of space. Then why didn't they publish it? Out of envy. I burst out laughing. The editors were envious of me? No. It was I who felt envy. I read your pages and threw them in the wastebasket. I couldn't bear that you were so good. For a few moments, I said nothing. How important that article had been to me. How much I had suffered. I couldn't believe it. Was it possible that Professor Galliani's favorite
Come
had
in.
been so envious of the lines of a middle school student that he threw them away? I felt that Nino was waiting for my reaction, but I didn't know how to play such a petty act within the radiant aura I had given him as a girl. The seconds passed, and I tried, disoriented, to keep it close to me, so that it could not reinforce the bad reputation that, according to Adele, Nino had in Milan, or the invitation not to trust him that had come to me from Leela and Antonio. Then I shook myself. The positive side of that confession leaped to my eyes, and I embraced him. There was, in essence, no need for him to tell me that episode. It was a bad deed that was very distant in time, and yet he had just told me. And that need of his to be sincere, greater than any personal gain, even at the risk of putting himself in a terrible light, moved me. Suddenly, starting from that moment, I felt that I could always believe him. We loved each other that night with more passion than usual. Upon waking, I realized that, in confessing his sin, Nino had confessed that in his eyes, I had always been a girl out of the ordinary, even when he was Nadia Galliani's boyfriend, even when he had become Leela's lover. How exciting it was to feel that I was not only loved, but esteemed. He entrusted his text to me. I helped him give it a more brilliant form. In those days in Argentario, I had the impression that I had now definitively expanded my capacity to feel, to understand, to express myself. Something that, I thought with pride, was confirmed by the modest welcome that the book I had written, goaded by him, to please him, had received outside Italy. I had everything at that moment. Only Day and Elsa were left in the margins. 16. I said nothing to my mother-in-law about Nino. I told her instead about the French journal, and portrayed myself as being fully absorbed by what I was writing. Meanwhile, if reluctantly, I thanked her for taking care of her grandchildren. Although I didn't trust her, I understood at that point that Adele had raised a real problem. What could I do to keep my life and my children together? Certainly, I intended to go and live with Nino soon, somewhere. And in that case, we would help each other. But meanwhile, it wouldn't be easy to balance the need to see each other. Day, Elsa, the writing, the public engagements, the pressures that Pietro, although he had become more reasonable, would nevertheless subject me to. Not to mention the problem of money. Very little remained of my own, and I still didn't know how much the new book would earn. It was out of the question that at the moment I could pay rent, telephone, daily life, for my daughters and me. And then where would our daily life take shape? Any moment now, I would go and get the children. But to take them where? To Florence, to the apartment where they were born, and in which, finding a gentle father, a courteous mother, they would be convinced that everything had miraculously gone back to normal? Did I want to delude them, knowing that as soon as Nino burst in, I would disappoint them even more? Should I tell Pietro to leave, even though I was the one who had broken with him? Or was it up to me to leave the apartment? I went to Genoa with 1,000 questions and no decision. My in-laws received me with polite coldness, Elsa with uncertain enthusiasm, and Day-Day with hostility. I didn't know the house in Genoa well. Only an impression of light remained in my mind. In reality, there were entire rooms full of books, old furniture, crystal chandeliers, floors covered with precious carpets, heavy curtains. Only the living room was bright. It had a big window that framed a section of light and sea, displaying it like a prized object. My daughters, I realized, moved through the entire apartment with more freedom than in their own house. They touched everything. They took what they wanted with never a reproach, and they spoke to the maid in the courteous but commanding tones they had learned from their grandmother. In the first hours after I arrived, they showed me their room. They wanted me to get excited about the many expensive toys that they would never have received from me and their father. They told me about the many wonderful things they had done and seen. I slowly realized that Day-Day had become very attached to her grandfather, while Elsa, although she had hugged and kissed me as much as she could, turned to Adele for anything she needed, or, when she was tired, climbed up on her lap and looked at me from there with a melancholy gaze, her thumb in her mouth. Had the children learned to do without me in so short a time? Or rather, were they exhausted by what they had seen and heard in the past months, and now, apprehensive of the swarm of disasters I conjured up, were afraid to take me back? I don't know. Certainly, I didn't dare to say immediately, pack your things and let's go. I stayed a few days. I began to care for them again, and my in-laws never interfered. Rather, at the first recourse to their authority against mine, especially by Day-Day, they withdrew, avoiding any conflict. Guido in particular was very careful to speak about other things. At first, he didn't even allude to the break between me and his son. After dinner, when Day-Day and Elsa went to bed, and he, politely, stayed with me for a while before shutting himself in his study to work late into the night. Evidently, Pietro did little more than apply his father's model. He was embarrassed. He usually took refuge in political talk, the deepening crisis of capitalism, the cure-all of austerity, the broadening area of marginalization, the earthquake in Friuli as the symbol of a precarious Italy, the great difficulties of the left, old parties and factions. But he did it without displaying any interest in my opinions, and I, in turn, made no effort to have any. If he actually decided to encourage me to say something, he fell back on my book, whose Italian edition I saw for the first time in that house. It was a slender volume, not very conspicuous, which arrived along with the many books and magazines that piled up continuously on the tables, waiting to be perused. One evening he asked some questions, and I, knowing that he hadn't read it and wouldn't, summarized for him the arguments, read him a few lines. In general, he listened seriously, attentive. In one case only did he offer some learned criticisms on a passage of Sophocles that I had cited inappropriately, and he assumed professorial tones that shamed me. He was a man who emanated authority, even though authority is a patina, and at times it doesn't take much to crack it, if only for a few minutes, and to glimpse a less edifying person. At a mention of feminism, Guido's composure suddenly shattered. An unexpected malice appeared in his eyes, and he began to hum sarcastically, red in the face. He, who in general had an anemic complexion, a couple of slogans he had heard. Sex, sex behind the wall. Who has orgasms of us all? No one. And also, we're not machines for reproduction, but women fighting for liberation. He sang in a low voice and laughed, all excited. When he realized that he had unpleasantly surprised me, he grabbed his glasses, cleaned them carefully, withdrew to his study. On those few evenings, Adele was almost always silent. But I soon realized that both she and her husband were looking for a way to draw me out into the open. Since I wouldn't bite, my father-in-law finally confronted the problem in his own way. When Dede and Elsa said goodnight, he asked his granddaughters in a sort of good-humored ritual, "What is the name of these two lovely young ladies?" "Dede, Elsa." And then, grandfather wants to hear the whole name. "Dede Airota, Elsa Airota." Airota like who? Like Papa. And also, like Grandpa. And what's Mama's name? "Elena Greco." And is your name Greco or Airota? Airota. Bravo. Good night, dear ones. Sweet dreams. Then, as soon as the children left the room, accompanied by Adele, he said, as if following a thread that started from the answers of the two children, "I've learned that the break with Pietro is due to Nino Sartori." I jumped. I nodded yes. He smiled. He began to praise Nino, but not with the absolute support of years earlier. He said that he was very intelligent, someone who knew what was what, but, he said, emphasizing the adversative conjunction, he is fickle. And he repeated the word as if to make sure that he had chosen the right one. Then he emphasized, I didn't like Sartori's most recent writings. And in a suddenly contemptuous tone, he relegated him to the heap of those who considered it more urgent to make the gears of neo-capitalism function, rather than to continue to demand transformations in social relations and in production. He used that language, but giving every word the substance of an insult. I couldn't bear it. I struggled to convince him that he was wrong. Adele returned just as I was citing the essays of Nino's that seemed to me most radical, and Guido listened to me, emitting the dull sound he usually resorted to when he was suspended between agreement and disagreement. I suddenly stopped, rather agitated. For a few minutes, my father-in-law seemed to soften his judgment. After all, it's difficult for all of us to orient ourselves in the chaos of the Italian crisis, and I can understand that young men like him find themselves in trouble, especially when they have a desire to act. Then he rose to go to his study. But before he disappeared, he had a second thought. He paused in the doorway and uttered harshly, "But there is doing and doing. Sartori is intelligence without traditions. He would rather be liked by those in charge than fight for an idea. Become a very useful technocrat." And he broke off. But still he hesitated, as if he had something much crueler on the tip of his tongue. He confined himself instead to muttering goodnight and went into his study. I felt Adele's gaze on me. I ought to retreat, I thought. I have to make up an excuse, say I'm tired. But I hoped that Adele would find a conciliating phrase that might soothe me. And so I asked, what does it mean that Nino is intelligence without traditions? She looked at me ironically. That he's no one. And for a person who is no one to become someone is more important than anything else. The result is that this Signor Saratore is an unreliable person. I, too, am an intelligence without traditions. She smiled. Yes, you are too. And in fact, you are unreliable. Silent. Adele had spoken serenely, as if the words had no emotional charge, but were limited to recording the facts. Still, I felt offended. What do you mean? That I trusted a son to you, and you didn't treat him honestly. If you wanted someone else, why did you marry him? I didn't know I wanted someone else. You're lying. I hesitated. I admitted, I'm lying. Yes. But why do you force me to give you a linear explanation? Linear explanations are almost always lies. You also spoke badly of Pietro. In fact, you supported me against him.
Baby, yesterday come here.
No, I was really
No,
on your side.
nannies.
But within a pact that you should have respected. What pact? Remaining with your husband and children. You were an Airota. Your daughters were Airotas. I didn't want you to feel unsatisfied and unhappy. I tried to help you be a good mother and a good wife. But if the pact is broken, everything changes. From me and from my husband, you'll have nothing anymore. In fact, I'll take away everything I've given you. I took a deep breath. I tried to keep my voice calm, just as she continued to do. Adele, I said, I am Elena Greco, and my daughters are my daughters. I don't give a damn about you Airotas. She nodded, pale, and her expression was now severe. It's obvious that you are Elena Greco. It's now far too obvious. But the children are my son's daughters, and we will not allow you to ruin them. 17. That was the first clash with my in-laws. Others followed, though they never reached such explicit contempt. Later, my in-laws confined themselves to demonstrating in every possible